Hello. In this class, we are going to think about direct language. We're going to think about the concept of face and how our interactions affect other people and how other people's interaction helps us. And we are going to think about politeness devices. So there will be specific questions during the video, so make sure that you have the Cyber Campus questions open and ready, and you will see each question is labeled with the specific name you will see on the screen. So I'll let you know when it is time to answer a question. I'll give some time for you to answer it. If you need to, you can pause the video and unpause when you are ready. Okay, so let's begin. So here is our first question for Cyber Campus, so check it out. So let's think about asking questions and about how direct is the language and how indirect is the language. So I will give you 4 examples, and thinking on a scale of 1 to 10, so 10 being the most direct, 1 being the least direct, how direct are each example? So we have, are you hungry? If you have time, would you like to have dinner with me? Are you doing anything after work? And let's get dinner. Okay, so those specific examples, think about on a scale of 1 to 10, how direct is each of them? Okay, so take a moment, look at the questions and think 1 to 10, which are the most direct and which are the least. Okay, so just take a moment. You can pause the video if you need to. Okay, so hopefully you have made your decisions. So we need to think about why are we using different types of language? Why not use the most direct language all the time? Well, the level of directness depends entirely on our social, cultural setting. So this is something we can think of as being high or low context communication. So high or low context communication. So high context communication relies on people understanding the context similarly. Low context communication does not rely on context, and therefore you can be, in fact, in low context, you need to be much more direct with your language. So high context, both people understand the situation, understand the context, and therefore your language choices can be less direct, can be more vague, but both of you can understand what the speaker is communicating. So problems come where people do not understand the situation in the same way. So one person is speaking in high context language, high context communication, but the other person is understanding in a very low context situation. The other person really needs to be told directly. So therefore they can't understand what the other person is saying because they are using high context language. So we can see this often if you get a group of people from different countries, and let's say two of them are from the same country or the same culture. Those two people can communicate quite differently compared to how they speak to the rest of the group, simply because they have a shared context. So let's think about why be indirect. Indirect language can and often is confusing if both people are not understanding the same context. It can be lengthy. Indirect language is often longer than direct language. I mean, direct language tends to be quite short because it is direct. You're saying exactly what you are trying to say. So, why do we use indirect language? For example, why would a professor write interesting on a bad paper? Why would that happen? So if we look at the question in Cyber Campus, what do you think the answer is for that? So let's call this indirect question. I'll give you a moment to answer. Well, we really need to consider in a much kind of deeper question of what is the purpose of language? What is the purpose of communication? In every human interaction, two things are happening at the same time. There is an exchange of information. So think about this as the effectiveness. So how clearly is the information being spoken, but also how clearly is it being understood? And there is a shaping of interpersonal relationships. So we can think of this as appropriateness. So the message, how effectively is that message being communicated? So are both people understanding the same context, the same situation? And how appropriate is it? So the speaker and the receiver, what is their social relationship? Is the speaker using appropriate language for the person receiving it? So register is an example of this. Are you using the correct register for that context? Okay, so register is simply one element of this, but appropriateness is a much more general idea. How appropriate is the language and the way of communicating? Okay, so we have exchange of information, how effective is it, and appropriateness. How is it shaping the interpersonal relationship? So is it helping or hurting that relationship? So let's think about the concept of face. So what are the two aspects of face? So now face has different specific meanings in different culture, but we can think of it as your social status, your social dignity, how you are respected. So this can be damaged in social situations. So for example, we have what is called involvement face. So involvement face is the desire to be liked and admired, and also the desire to be part of a group. Therefore, in a social situation, we can damage somebody's involvement face. So how might we damage or threaten someone's involvement face? It might be by disagreeing with them. Someone says their opinion, you disagree, and they feel hurt by that. They feel maybe humiliated or upset or dishonored by it, depending on the person. So this would damage or threaten their involvement face. We might also do this by challenging them, meaning kind of similar to disagreeing. You might say, well, what do you mean by that? And how can that be true? We have found the opposite to be true. You're kind of challenging that person. So especially in public or group settings, this can easily damage the involvement face. Interrupting, so making them feel that what they are saying is not important or not valued in the interaction. Criticizing or insulting or boasting. Now, boasting is an interesting one. If you think about a situation where you have two or more people, if one person is boasting, what they're kind of doing is putting the other people or person down. So they're trying to raise their own status and lower the other person's status. Maybe this is intentional, maybe not. But so these 6 things can damage the involvement face. Okay, so the person feels upset or disrespected, or they have lost some dignity or some honor, or they have lost status. The second example we have is called independence face. So independence face. So this is the desire not to be imposed upon or not to be bothered or annoyed by something. Okay, so not to be imposed upon, not to be bothered or annoyed by something. So this is called independence face. So how can we damage or threaten someone's independence face? Well, when you feel bothered or annoyed by somebody, or you feel that somebody is imposing something on you. So it could be someone requesting help or favors, someone warning you against something that you enjoy or something that you value yourself. It's like, oh, if you keep listening to music so loud, you're going to permanently damage your ears. Whether that is true or not, the feeling of somebody telling you what to do, warning you in this case, is damaging that independence face. So that feeling of how can they tell me what to do? That is the independent face being damaged. So it can also be threatened or damaged by commanding, somebody ordering you around. Or it might also be somebody suggesting or advising, especially if you did not ask for that advice. So we have involvement face, which is damaged or threatened by these actions. And we have independent or independence face, which is damaged by these actions. So let's think about some examples. So this is example A. So this person says, oh, I don't like your new hairstyle. You look much better before. So look at the questions and look for face example A. And what is the speaker doing with language? So requesting, warning, commanding, suggesting, advising, etc. And which face or faces is the speaker probably damaging here and why? Okay, I will give you a moment to think about your answers. So this is example A. Okay, let's think about example B. So your work is absolutely terrible. Okay, so what is the speaker doing with the language? So disagreeing, challenging, interrupting, criticizing, etc. And which face or faces is the speaker probably damaging? So think, what is the primary face being damaged? Okay, so again, I'll give you 30 seconds. So choose your answer in Cybercampus. Okay, and final example, example C. Oh, you're so pretty. Give me your phone number now. So what is the speaker doing with language? So disagreeing, criticizing, etc. And which face is probably being damaged? Okay, so again, 30 seconds. Have a think. Okay, so this idea of face is important because every social interaction, we are shaping that social relationship. And the language we choose, be it direct, indirect, can damage the involvement face or the independent face. So every interaction that we have, we are making choices. So our choices affect everything. We make choices when we speak, we make choices when we listen. The choices depend on the context. Who are you speaking to? What is the message you are trying to convey? But also, it is dependent on the function. So the function would be the reason for the interaction or the purpose. For example, are you complaining? Are you requesting? Are you explaining? Are you flirting? Are you demanding? This is called the function. And again, depending on the function, the relationship, all of this contextual information is affecting that message. So context is everything. Every language decision we make is because of that context. It's being affected by that context. And this is where it's very easy to make language mistakes. You're direct in a context and social relationship where you should be indirect, or you are indirect in a context and social relationship where you should be direct. And everything in between. Okay, so it's not direct or indirect, there is a whole spectrum of language. So when we need to be direct or when we need to be indirect, what is very useful is having politeness devices. So we can think of this as language tools that you can use. So here is the wrench that is our tool. So we have 3 different types of tools. We have what's called verbal hedges. We have vague language. And we have discourse markers. Okay, so verbal hedges, vague language, and discourse markers. So let's start with verbal hedges first. So verbal hedges is language that will lessen or reduce the impact of the language. So this is very useful when we are criticizing or complaining. We don't want to be too direct in a lot of contexts, a lot of social relationships. It is much better to be indirect, to kind of give more balanced language. So verbal hedges, we are reducing or lessening the impact of language. Vague language. This is to, as it suggests, to make language more ambiguous. You are allowing more flexibility in the understanding. So you're not saying something that A is B. You want to have a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more ambiguity, vagueness in your language and language choices. And discourse markers, they are used to connect language and also send signals. So often discourse markers do not have a dictionary meaning. They don't have a grammar function. What they are doing is signaling something. So a very common example would be like. So like, of course, has a grammatical meaning of I like ice cream, or A is like B, talking about similarity. But like can also be keeping your turn in the conversation. If you say, and I was like, give me 5 minutes. That like does not mean I like ice cream, and it does not mean A is like B. What it's doing is keeping your turn in the conversation. It's stopping the other person interrupting and taking away your turn in the conversation. So discourse markers are signaling the meaning or signaling some kind of context. So let's start with some examples of hedges. So hedges are lessening the impact of language. So if we have a look at this glorious Christmas sweater. So you may think, wow, that sweater is ugly. However, you would not say this to the person. So if we look in the questions, so back into Cybercampus, and think, what would be a better answer for that? What would lessen the impact of saying what an ugly sweater? Okay, so look for Hedges answer 1 and think, what answer is hedging? What is lessening the impact of that language? Okay, take 30 seconds. Okay, so here are some kind of examples of hedging language. So the hedging is in red here. So maybe she just feels kind of down. So maybe that is reducing the impact. Just, again, is reducing the strength, how strong something is. Kind of is reducing. And down, so we're not saying the word sad. Sad feels quite strong. It's not an ambiguous word. We know what sad means, but down a little bit less definite. So maybe she just feels kind of down. Okay, so we're reducing the impact. It seems that you might have been late yesterday. Now, a direct sentence would be, you were late yesterday. However, saying it seems allows for being incorrect, right? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you were not late. Might have been late. Again, same thing. It's not saying definitely. It's saying you might have been late. Maybe you were late. It seems that you were late. However, in the interaction, both people know what that means. Both people know it's saying you were late. But because of the social relationship, we're using this less strong language. We're using words that reduce the strength of your language. Okay, let's look at another example. Would it be possible to help me if it's not too much trouble? Okay, so again, would it be possible? It's reducing the strength. On a basic level, we think of that as being polite language. What it's actually doing is hedging. It's reducing the strength, the impact. If it's not too much trouble. So again, you are acknowledging it is trouble. It is a burden. But you're adding in this other language, too much trouble. If it's not too much trouble. Okay, so would it be possible? You are softening your sentences. Okay, so this is hedging. Okay, and very useful in social relationships. What you say feels less strong, it feels less direct, feels less demanding. If you're criticizing, you feel like you're being less critical. So hedging is helping to shape that social relationship. All right. Next, we have vague language. So we want to make our language a little bit more ambiguous, a little bit more ambiguous. So not so clear. So I'll give you an example of this. If we have John come over at 5 o'clock. Okay, that is quite direct, and you could damage his face by demanding that he come over at 5 o'clock on the dot. So in Cybercampus, have a think, how could we use the different language to make that less demanding and to make it a little bit more vague? Okay, so in Cybercampus, have a look for vague language answer 1. Choose which one you think would be a more vague request. Okay, so again, take 30 seconds on that, please. Discourse markers are connecting language, but also sending signals to the listener. So again, they have a meaning which is, as we say, below the surface, below the sentence level, the word level, where in context, both people know what those signals mean. So for example, what you want to say is, oh, he's very smart, but he's young and naive, and he's quiet and shy. So what you're going to say is, well, to be honest, okay, so when you say, well, in that tone, you're announcing, I'm going to disagree, or I'm going to say something contrary. As soon as you hear that, well, that tone, that word, you have a good feeling what's coming. So it's kind of indicating to the other person that you are going to disagree or give an unpopular opinion, perhaps. To be honest. Okay, so when we hear that, what you're signaling is, get ready. You might not like what I am going to say. So, to be honest, the discourse marker, it's preparing the other person. I'm going to say something you might not like. He's very smart, but with all due respect, so what this is signaling is the other person has a higher status to you. So the person you are speaking to has a higher status. Usually this kind of language, it's used in a professional situation. So probably speaking to a boss or a superior of some kind. With all due respect, what that means is I am going to go against your opinions or your wishes, and I'm going to not challenge your authority, but I'm going to disagree with it. So with all due respect, what it is signaling is I'm going to say something that kind of challenges your status. Okay, not necessarily in a bad way, but certainly it understands that there is a hierarchy, that there is a status difference, a power difference. So, well, you're signaling that you're going to disagree. To be honest, you're signaling you might not like what I'm going to say. And with all due respect, you're signaling I understand there is a power difference here, but I'm still going to disagree, or I'm still going to say something against what the person with the higher power has said or thinks. So some other examples of this might be, frankly speaking. So frankly speaking, again, like, to be honest, the message is I'm going to say something and you might not like what I'm going to say. You know, you shouldn't smoke. Okay, so notice that this is not saying you know you shouldn't smoke. So it's not saying you are aware that you should not smoke. The you know is signaling that I'm going to say something might seem obvious and you might not like it. It's like, you know, and especially that tone, right? You know, it's like, you know, you should really get a shower before you go out and meet people. We all know what that means, right? But the, you know, that tone, it says everything. So in my opinion, if you ask me, well, we know that everything we say is our opinion. So the fact you're announcing it is kind of announcing there's got to be something significant about what comes next. Maybe it's a totally new idea if you're making a decision in a group. Maybe it's an unpopular opinion. But the discourse marker, you are kind of signaling that I'm going to either give a totally left field, unique opinion, or I'm going to give an unpopular opinion. Actually, okay, we all know the actually people. It's signaling I'm going to correct you. It's like, actually, it was made in 1968. We know what that actually means. By the way, signaling that we're changing the subject. It's like, oh, by the way, there is a new book you should pick up. So by the way, what it that phrase as a combination is signaling I'm changing the subjects, or you're adding extra information. Okay, again, and they can be different in different contexts. Finally, anyway, and especially that tone, but anyway, we know what it means in a social interaction. It means you are wrapping up. You're going to wrap up that conversation. Don't ask me anything new. Don't start a new topic. This conversation is ending. Anyway, it's been lovely talking to you. I'll see you again soon, I hope. We know what that anyway means. We are wrapping up this conversation. We're stopping it. So if we go back into Cyber Campus, have a look at the discourse marker questions and think about what it is that is being signaled by those discourse markers. Okay, so again, take another 30 seconds or so. You can pause the video if you need to. So discourse marker questions in Cyber Campus.